So this is your fifth and final video for your Chapter 1 Solving Equations review. So if you've been working this a little at a time, you are almost finished. So this last section is over solving literal equations. And remember, literal equations are just equations that have two or more variables. So if you look at the ones for 41 through 44, you are solving the literal equation for y. So when you're solving for y, that means you're trying to isolate y. So if you look at number 41, it says y minus 2x equals 14. If we're trying to isolate y, then we need to do the opposite of minus 2x. So we are going to add 2x to both sides. So when I add 2x to both sides, remember a negative 2x and a positive 2x would cancel. And then you can bring down your y. Now I can't actually add 14 plus 2x because those are not like terms. Remember, you can only add x's with x's and constants with constants. So that means that this equation would be y equals 14 plus 2x. You know you're finished solving the equation for y when y is alone. So that would be my final answer. Okay, so 42 is very similar to 41, so why don't you go ahead and solve number 42, pause the video to do that, and then you can restart to check your work with mine. So for number 42, once again, we're trying to get y by itself, and so the opposite of a positive 6x was minus 6x. So 6x minus 6x cancels. I brought down my y, and then my answer would be 2 minus 6x. You know you're finished when the variable that you're solving for is isolated. So y is by itself, so I know I'm finished. Alright, so let's look at number 43. It's slightly different because if we're trying to get y by itself, notice I have 14x minus 7y. So in order to get y alone, the first thing I have to do is get rid of this 14x. So the opposite of positive 14x would be to subtract 14x from both sides. So that's what I'm doing first. When I do that, positive and negative 14x will cancel, and I bring down my minus 7y equals 21 minus 14x. Then from here, y still isn't alone. Notice it's being multiplied right here by negative 7. So the opposite of multiplying by negative 7 would be to divide. Now when you go to divide, make sure you divide every single part of the equation by negative 7. So negative 7 divided by negative 7 will leave me with 1y. Then I've got 21 divided by negative 7, which is negative 3. Then I have negative 14x divided by negative 7. So negative 14 divided by negative 7 would leave me with positive 2x. Now I know I'm finished because y is all by itself. So let me just go over that last part once again. So I had to divide by negative 7, because that's the opposite of multiplying. But when I divide every single term by negative 7. So negative 7 divided by negative 7 left me with 1y. 21 divided by negative 7 left me with negative 3. Negative 14 divided by negative 7 left me with positive 2x. Alright, so now let's go ahead and look at number 44. So 44 is different than 43 because we have a constant, which is 4, plus y, equals 12x minus 3y. So if I'm trying to solve for y, before I can get y alone, I've got to make sure all the y's are together on one side of the equation. So that's actually what I'm going to take care of first. I want to move that negative 3y by adding, because that's the opposite, so that all my y's are put together. So it's like, kind of like combining like terms, but not really because I'm moving across the equal sign. So positive and negative 3y would cancel. Then I'm going to go ahead and bring down my 4. Y plus 3y is 4y. Equals 12x. I just brought that straight down as well. Okay, from here, I'm still trying to get y by itself, so I want to move that positive 4 to the other side by subtracting 4, because that's the opposite. So when I do that, positive and negative 4 cancel, and I'm left with 4y equals 12x minus 4. Now this step looks very similar to the step that I was just talking about over here in this problem. So notice 4 is being multiplied by y, and the opposite of multiplying by 4 would be to divide. Make sure you divide every single term by 4. So 4 divided by 4 leaves me with 1y, 12x divided by 4 leaves me with 3x, and negative 4 divided by 4 leaves me with minus 1. Then at that point, I know I'm finished because y is by itself. For 45 and 46, we are trying to solve the equation for x. So notice on number 45, we have y by itself here, but that doesn't help me because we're trying to get x by itself. So notice that I have a 3x plus 6x on the same side of the equal sign. Remember, when we have that, we have to clean up our problem by combining like terms. So we have y equals, and then 3x plus 6x is 9x. Then the opposite of multiplying by 9 would be to divide both sides by 9. And when we do that, we find out that y over 9 is equal to x. And we know we're finished because now we have isolated x. Alright, so looking at number 46, this is something that we talked about for 2 days, and that was what happens when you're trying to isolate x, but x is actually with 2 different terms in your equation. Now these are not like terms because ux can't be added to rx because they don't have the same variables. So we talked about how you could factor, and factoring is just undoing multiplication. So if I divide out that x and bring it to the front, like that multiplication had never occurred, that would leave me with x, open parentheses, and then u plus r, close the parentheses, equals w. Now remember, what allows us to do that is if I was to distribute, x would go back to the u and be ux, and x would go back with r and be rx. So this problem right here with x on the outside of the parentheses is just undoing the multiplication that's occurred. So now if I'm trying to get x by itself, the opposite of multiplying by u plus r would be to divide. So remember, we're going to have to do that to both sides of the equation. So those will cancel. Anything divided by itself is 1. So we have 1x equals w over u plus r. I know I'm finished because x is by itself. So if you look at number 47, we have a word problem here, but this type of word problem isn't too bad because they're giving me my equation. So they're telling me that to find total cost in dollars of playing an online game, you can use this equation, c equals 30x plus 50. They're telling us that x is the number of months you play, and they want us to solve for x. So I want you to pause the video and see if you can solve c equals 30x plus 50 for x. Okay, so once you get x by itself, like I've done here, the next thing that I want you to do is to find out how many months do you play the game when you spend $170. So remember, back up here, c was your cost in dollars. So they've given me my cost. So I'm going to substitute 170 in for c into my equation. So if I did 170 minus 50 divided by 30, that's supposed to give me x, which is how many months you play. So 170 minus 50 is 120, divided by 30 is 4. So I know that if you spend $170, then you've played for 4 months. Okay? They also want you to figure out, well, what if you spent $260? So why don't you pause the video and see if you can figure out how many months you would have played then. So to figure that out, all you had to do was replace c with 260. So I had 260 minus 50, which was 210, divided by 30, which gave me 7 months. So when they give you the literal equation, it's a little bit easier to maneuver because you're just substituting the value in for the variable and solving. For this last equation, it's been broken up into 3 parts, and they are telling you that the total profit P in dollars of a painter is given by P equals 2x minus 45. X is the area of the painting in square inches. So for letter A, they're asking me to find the profit. So that's P when the painting is 176 square inches. So just like with the last problem, we're using the equation and subbing in for the value of the variable. So we have P equals 2 times 176 minus 245. The key here is making sure that you're paying attention to what each variable stands for so that you're plugging in the right place. Okay, so if you do that math, 2 times 176 minus 245, you find out that the profit should be $107. All right, now look at B. So how is B different than A? Well, for B, they're asking me for the profit of a painting that's 24 inches by 48 inches. So they haven't given me the area of the painting. However, you should be able to calculate that by multiplying 24 by 48. So that's step 1. The first thing I'm doing is calculating the area by doing 24 times 48, because that would give me the area in square inches. So when I do that, I find out that that is 1,152 square inches. Now I can use that value in the equation to find the profit. So I know that the profit has to equal 2 times the area, which is 1,152, minus 245. So notice this second part looks exactly like what we did on the first problem. So I'm subbing in those values, and I find out that the profit on this one would be $2,059. Okay? All right, so the first 2 problems, they gave me the square feet, or I found it and put it in, and I was looking for profit. If you look at C, they're giving me the profit. It says the painter's profit is $835. Find the area. So now they're giving me P, and I'm looking for X. So I'm going to sub in that value. 835 is P. That's supposed to equal 2 times X minus 245. So this looks like the equations that we've been solving for the last 3 weeks. So why don't you go ahead and pause the video and see if you can find the area by solving for X. So to solve this problem, the first thing that I did was I added 245 to both sides because that was the opposite of minus. Those would cancel, and I got 1,080 equals 2x. Then the opposite of multiplying by 2 was to divide both sides by 2, and I found out that x was 540. Since it is asking me for area, I know that area is going to be in square units, and in this particular problem, x was in square inches. So I know that my answer is 540 square inches. Okay, at this point you should be finished with your Chapter 1 review. If at any point during this review you felt like you did not understand something and you watched the video and it didn't help, hopefully you have come in for tutoring or you have time to come into tutoring prior to the Chapter 1 test. And I will see you in class tomorrow.